Thank you so much for joining this session. I know there are a lot of interesting sessions, but I appreciate everybody joining this one. My name is Pooja Crahen, and today I'm going to be talking about how we're approaching governed and scalable analytics at Okta and how we're going from silos to AI ready. Before we begin, I wanted to start by asking you to think about, when was the last time you made a decision with bad data or trusted an AI recommendation that felt off? That discomfort is what happens when governance and context are missing. Okay, so let's start this presentation now. My name is Pooja Crahen. I'm currently a principal analytics engineer at Okta. As part of the platform team, my focus is to bridge the gap between raw data and business outcomes. Before we dive into the session, here's a little bit about me. From Comcast and media business to Okta security and identity, my career has spanned multiple domains, tech stack, and industries. I've also authored several Tableau courses on the Pluralsight platform that focus on advanced technical concepts and beautiful dashboard design. Currently at Okta, I lead our move to data modernization, and I also led our move to implementing dbt within our tech stack. As a thought leader, my passion for data has taken me on global stages, from Japan to Singapore, to New Orleans to Las Vegas, and these experiences have really shaped the way I think about data, tools, and processes. And I'm really excited to be here to talk to you guys about what we're doing at Okta in terms of scalability and governance. One thing that has always stood out to me in these talks is that even though these talks are about tools and features, at the end of the day, what really moves the needle for me is the clarity that these tools bring about. We're going to be talking about how we're improving our processes at Okta to do exactly that. So here's the agenda for today. We'll cover who we are as Okta, what we do and how we empower our teams, our challenges with data and information silos, our vision and journey to govern and scalable analytics. I will then walk you through our AI prototype that we built on top of our foundational layer, and followed by outcomes and impact of having something like dbt in our tech stack and the positive impact that it has had, followed by a few key takeaways that you should take away from this session today. Okay, so we are the world's identity company. How many of you here use Okta? And how many of you don't? Meet me outside the session. Okay. So we secure the identity of every AI agent across its full life cycle in any environment, no matter the task. Some of our key offerings are SSO, MFA, LCM, and customer identity solutions. With the kind of product offerings, you can already imagine the kinds and the volume of data that we deal with. So things like user identity data, customer identity data, authentication and authorization, and a lot of application data. Within Okta, we are the team of the enterprise data team. We're a team of 40+ people in and around US and India. We empower the enterprise with trusted and transparent insights. Some of the things that we offer, which is now rapidly changing with innovation and technology and the rise of AI, so it's not limited to this list, but enterprise dashboarding, data integration and automation through Snowflake, data science and augmented insights, and community empowerment throughout Okta. And then within this team, we are broken down in 3 different pillars. So enterprise data platform, insights and empowerment, data and insights. And then within each, I'm sure many other organizations have a similar structure with data engineering, applications, and operations, and then marketing analytics, product analytics, and finance analytics being the sub-teams for insights and empowerment. And the data and insights team in general, does things like company events, community, and enablement. All this to tell you that we're going to focus on one area to kind of showcase how silos are unintentionally created. So let's focus on insights and empowerment within the marketing, product, and finance analytics terms. So our marketing analytics team serves embedded analysts across the business. So things like GTM, digital analytics, and the reason and the way the silos are created is, these teams work with several sales and marketing applications. They have embedded logic on BI tools. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody here faces that challenge where the logic is taken away from the data platform and stored in other applications. They're also a mix of SQL savvy users, who are not so technical. They don't want to rely on data teams for quick ad hoc analysis, so they end up taking some of the data points and creating their own version of analytics, which creates further information and data silos in their teams. And then the digital analytics team also has their own dbt instance, further creating this disconnected way of operating with the data team. This is just one example, but customer first, renewal, sales, all of the other teams have a similar structure. I'm not going to go through that for the sake of time, but you get the idea. And then on top of that, on top of the complex data ecosystem that we already have, our data environment is really complex. So we have multiple tools, domains, teams, and then we also have our US public sector customers. So it further adds complexity to our data ecosystem. It's basically every problem times 2. So as you can see, from raw data sources all the way to governance, we have several tools at play, which creates a lot of operational challenges. One of the first challenge here being lack of governance. Again, I'm pretty sure that this is not common to Okta. Some of the things that we're dealing with is struggles with data quality. Things like inconsistencies in business logic, as I alluded to before, and data duplication. What's the impact of having some of this lack of governance for a large enterprise like Okta, right? So one of the first ones is loss of trust. Teams are constantly fighting about the right numbers to trust because they have so many different places they could get the same number at. So there is a lot of trust involved here, but then we're not really serving that trust, right? So the other thing is the reduced collaboration. So many teams who want to rely on the data teams can't for the sake of speed or accuracy or just the fact that domain knowledge is so siloed within their particular team. So they're spending a lot of time doing their own analysis, reducing collaboration with the data team, and duplication of efforts, because sometimes just because they don't know something exists, they will be more likely to duplicate the work on their side. Inefficiencies in pipelines is another thing. We use Airflow for orchestration, and a lot of our orchestration are manual in terms of manual dependency management. So it creates a lot of technical debt that hinders agility and performance. And some of the impact that this has on the business is that we're slower to ship those data products. We have increased infrastructure costs because of the same reason, and we have reduced productivity amongst teams. And then the other one is data and information silos. The whole gist of this conversation is that a large organization with multi-product offerings that aren't fully integrated leads to data and information silos, right? So some of the impact that this has is impaired decision-making across the org, increased operational costs, and reduced collaboration. So with all of these operational challenges, we had one vision in mind, to create a unified and governed platform that would solve some of these complexities in our data ecosystem. So one of the first one was robust governance. Why? Because we want reliable data. We want data contracts with upstream owners, so when things break, we know what the right lines of ownership are. I think if you know the right owners for your data assets, it's half the problems generally solved, right? Like, I think the right levels of ownership creates accountability. And data quality, with the rise of AI and the technological evolution that we're seeing, data quality has always been important, but more so even now. And then documentation. So one of the other things that we're encountering is that we're a global team. Documentation, as cumbersome as it may sound, is so important because we want all of these AI agents and humans across these different time zones, to operate off of context and not chaos. So here are a few things that we're doing to shorten the gap between our lack of governance to robust governance. So we did a multiple amount of things to achieve the robust governance that I'm alluding to here, but I'm going to cover the highlighted boxes just for the sake of the time for this presentation. One of the first things that we did was early business alignment. I mean, I've been in so many meetings before where the right people are not involved in the conversation. And that creates more problems than help, because you're probably thinking like, oh, why do we need them? We're just going to be able to solve the problem ourselves. But it generally creates this disconnected effort again, where you are not really solving the problems that people actually need, and you might just be operating in a silo. So, having the right people at the right time should never be an option or an afterthought, and that's one thing that we're valuing at Okta. So early business alignment is key to some of our decisions that we're making. Standardized style guides. This is also very easy said than done, I think. Many people have some of these standards and documentations in their workflow, but often don't end up using it. So one thing that we've done with the standardized style guide is making it part of our CI process. So it's not something that just sits along in your documentation repository, but we're enforcing some of these things in our CI pipeline. So for example, if we have a lint file which reads your SQL for readability, we're enforcing that everybody follows those rules as set in those practices, to then the CI check absolutely failing as the first step if you have not fixed your lint. It's just one of the things that we've done to make sure that everybody's following the rules. One of the other things that we did here was the naming convention. So pretty common practice across industry, staging, intermediate, and marts, so it doesn't just make for an easier development time, but it also makes discoverability easier for other teams. So you might have a lot of context as you're working on your projects, but we want to make this process easier for teams outside of the data team. So when they come into Snowflake, they have an easier time understanding and finding where the right data lives. And of course, test coverage. So this is another thing that for me personally is very important, because if you are not testing assertions about your data, you're just making mistakes at scale. I mean, fast queries are great. Many times people are like, oh, why do I need a test? I personally know that it works, but there are external circumstances that could contribute to your data failing in production, even though you fully tested it in development. So always test your data is one of the first things that we also did, to make sure that we're following these rules from lack of governance to robust governance. Okay, so the next one that we want to talk about is efficiency in our data pipelines. So why? Because of the manual dependencies we had, we want to make sure that we are reducing costs. Our rapidly changing business needs stability in our pipeline so that it's not volatile just because something changed in the definition. Which is why efficiency in pipelines was our other goal or pillar when we wanted to implement this vision. And we're also at a time at Okta where speed is not the only thing that's important. We need speed, accuracy, and agility. And that comes from confidence in your data. Okay, so here are the things that we did to go from inefficient and error-prone to efficient and accurate data pipelines. The first thing that we did was we created this new development workflow. So every analyst or analytics engineer on our team has a separate database and role associated with that database. So they're able to, use that as their playground, right, to document and test their assertions about the data before they even push code to GitHub. With the new Fusion enhancements that we just heard at the keynote today, this is going to improve even more, because even before committing the PRs, we're able to test what is going to fail. We're going to be able to detect those errors way faster. The other thing that we're really doing is using the templatized, the business SQL. I was just thinking about the thing that Elias said or the CEO of Fivetran said, just because you can use curly brackets. That was in my mind when I was talking about this. But yeah, we're basically using the templatized business SQL to not only improve, readability and reusability, but also improve transparency. So what is legacy code really? It's just something that's hidden in your repo, right? So we're bringing visibility into some of these templatized business SQL by making reusability part of it. And then the other thing that we're doing is the CI/CD process. So DBT comes with baked-in CI/CD process, but the way this is really helping us is that as opposed to the original method that we had, where we're rolling all of the PRs in a single deployment, we are testing all of our development and issues and errors and all of that within each PR check. So anytime a CI check runs, anytime a PR is created, the CI check completely runs from end to end, making sure that we don't have any breaking downstream changes. And then finally, self-service analytics. Why? Because we have this internal shift at Okta where we're changing our mindset from dashboards to decision making, and we want to enable people to ask the right questions of our data. Allow analytics for non-BI use cases. Again, with the rise of AI, we want AI agents to also ask these questions, and make sure that we're providing them with that governance and scalability that they need for self-service. So again, there are a few things that we did to go from data and information silos to empowering self-service analytics at scale. One of the first things was role-based access on Snowflake. So just because your teams have access to the staging, intermediate, and marts, the question generally comes is like, should they be actually coding? So we're also tying what we're doing on DBT with Snowflake. So it's not just because you have access you should do it, but more by defining these access more granularly. So there are only a few people who have access to the right data, and that also ensures that access to the data stays in the hands of the people who should have access. And then I think so much of the data work that we do behind the scenes just always goes unnoticed. I think one of the things that I really like about DBT is that it's bringing the more important work to the forefront. So we're able to enable and educate the rest of the masses at Okta, enabling them to use the right techniques, the right skills to elevate, the team success collectively. And finally, self-service is not about gatekeeping access. I think we've taught that for a long time. I think it's more about empowering people to ask the right questions. I think DBT is helping us create that transformation layer where asking those questions can be made possible in a governed way. So that gave us our robust vision of what we really wanted to do. So we have robust governance, we have efficiency in our pipelines, and we have self-service analytics with the right guardrails for empowering our people to ask the right questions. Post that, here is what the architecture diagram now looks like. So all of our application data is ingested via Airflow. This is where we're on this journey of making sure that things like data contracts, data quality, data documentation with upstream owners is intact. That data is then landed on Snowflake, and here's where we're doing things like version control, our role-based access, auditability, and scalability. DBT now sits at the transformation layer post Snowflake, where we're doing things like model governance, so access in groups. I'm not sure how many of you have used that, but some of this really helps with your data mesh architecture, making sure that your models are either public or private, depending on your settings. But in this layer is what we're doing: pipeline efficiency, modular and reusable building blocks, templatized business SQL. A lot of the automation that I described earlier is all fit in to this transformation layer in DBT. And then post that, so all of the output that we have from our DBT models then gets fed into very different use cases. So things like Tableau, for example, so your dashboarding, your BI use cases. Things like DBT Mesh, we're also on this journey of opening up DBT to the rest of the masses who are not within data team. So this would help create those guardrails in our transformation layer. They can then use that layer to further enhance, some of the models and data that we're creating versus taking that data out of the transformation layer and putting it into Tableau and other applications, which was creating that original rift that I talked about. The other more popular ones is the AI ML use cases. We're also doing an ML POC with dbt and Snowpark. So this is where we're going to be using the outputs of the model into that ML use case. And then also the AI prototype that we built on top of it. So I'll just walk you through that, what we did on that AI use case. But essentially all of the integrations that we have, so things like Salesforce or other applications that you want to integrate, with dbt, that really helps with that too. And then that's the self-service analytics ecosystem, basically. Okay, so once we had all of our transformation layers set up with the right things that I just mentioned, we had one goal. We wanted a working AI prototype which supports this internal shift from dashboarding to decision making, where we wanted people to ask, a natural language question of your data. We're in the process of completely rehauling our product data at Okta, and we're learning that the data is really large. We're working with billions, trillions of rows worth of data. So, shifting away from dashboarding to that, active decision making is going to help a lot because we're not expecting people to actually query that large amounts of data. So we had three main outputs for the AI prototype that we wanted to build. We wanted dbt models for our activation and feature adoption. We also wanted a semantic layer or like the context for AI that we would need within that semantic layer, and the user's ability to ask a natural language question and receive a correct response, like Tristan said earlier, every time, not just the first time they would ask the question. So what does AI really need from your data, right? Like that's the first thing that we had in our minds. Like what are we actually doing with this data and the AI that's going to be, using that data? In order for that, you need meaningful information. Data that is feeding your AI agents really need to be high quality. So it needs to know where it's coming from, where it's going. Like Tristan said earlier today too, cleanliness, accuracy, and reliability of that data are non-negotiables. We totally needed that for our transformation layer to actually have so that AI can operate confidently. And then consistent definitions and semantics would give your AI usable blocks that they can actually use and not something that is just sporadic and breaking at times. And then clear governance that includes things like lineage, observability, and role-based access to ensure that you're using AI responsibly. And because we had all of these things that I just mentioned in our transformation layer, we were at a right spot at the time, to feed that output into Snowflake Cortex. So our AI prototype actually included, having high quality governed data that is consistent in definition and semantics. And then we are using Snowflake Cortex, the verified query repository, to generate those questions and the underlying queries, where we're really able to refine, the dimensions and facts with synonyms to further enrich those search parameters that you would have on Cortex. So here is an example of why I said that this was important, because in this case, AI is helping turn rows of data into recommendations that were not possible before, because we were stuck in this loop of Tableau dashboards either breaking or extracts taking too long to refresh, simply because of the volume of the data that we have for our product data ecosystem. Okay, so here's our current state. So in terms of our current state, right, in the AI capabilities that I just described, dbt shapes our raw data and turns this into this trusted, scalable model. Snowflake Cortex is then turning those models into instant AI-driven answers with the verified query repository that I just described earlier. And then predictive insights guide faster decisions and personalized customer experiences depending on what question is asked of our data. But the current state that I just described is good in a way when it is just a prototype, right? Like we want to go ahead from that exploratory AI that I just described more towards conversational AI. And where we're going with that and how we're thinking about that is a user would ask a natural language question right? The AI chatbot would then take that question and route it to MCP, which is going to be our governed DBT semantic layer. Semantic layer would then really compile the safe, SQL plan that we want the MCP server to really fetch and Snowflake to execute. Snowflake would then execute that SQL plan, returning a trusted answer back to the user, complete with all of the lineage. So I think this process is a lot different than what we have currently with our exploratory AI and where we're trying to go with conversational AI capabilities on top of our data. We're not there yet, but that's our future vision of where we want to go. Some of the advantages of this conversational AI that I just described are because the models are version controlled in DBT. MCP then is going to enforce those trusted queries and it avoids the AI hallucinations. And then AI, one of the important things here is that your AI is not going to generate SQL from scratch every time a question is asked. It's going to use MCP for that, the definition, the semantics that are then stored, and then it's going to fetch all of that metadata. So I think there's a lot of benefit to moving away from exploratory to conversational. And this is where my hope would be that we go as a team in the coming days and months. So I think measuring business impact is difficult, right? Like we have so many stakeholders in and across Okta, but some of the impact that we're already seeing, as part of having DBT into our tech stack is that we're just faster at delivering. Because of all of the rapid deployment, CI/CD, the things that we have done to involve the right people at the right time, we're faster at delivering and they're faster at getting those insights, which means that we're all making decisions really fast, and not just fast decisions, but when they need those insights, when they're out on the field, when we have to share numbers out on the street. Whenever that is, we're just faster at all of that. The other thing that we've noticed is, it's an intangible value, but we're really improving trust with the data team. So, people tend to trust numbers and processes when it is governed and scalable. And we've really seen that trust, go up, whether it's to add a new metric to your data set, whether it's new acquisitions, whatever it is, we're just seeing a lot more trust in the numbers that we're creating. The other thing is increased data adoption. So still in the early phase, but we're starting to see that more and more people are not just creating things in DBT within data teams, but even people outside of data teams want to get their hands on to DBT because they're more excited about the outcomes that it's going to create for that long-term, long-lasting benefits to their own teams. And then reduced manual efforts. This is also still in the early phase, but with enabling DBT Mesh and DBT Canvas, we're going to be empowering more and more people to use the assets and artifacts that the data team is creating versus taking it out and doing their own thing. And of course, all of this leading to positive revenue impact, faster data delivery, faster data adoption, improved trust. All of this just leads to a more better decision-making process when it actually matters. So here are a few key takeaways before I let you go. I want to say that breaking down data silos is not just about connecting systems. It's about building governed foundations so AI can scale with context and not chaos, right? When rules are clear and semantics are consistent, your teams really operate fast and they can stop debating around the right numbers and they can start acting on it. The other thing is that when your transformation layer is resilient, you're not just solving for today's problem. So with the product data ecosystem that I mentioned earlier, we are anticipating change and making sure that we're building for tomorrow's growth. Solving for today's problem phase is kind of over, I think, for us. And then designing for evolution. So whether it's new acquisitions, new metrics that you're adding, when you design for evolution, you really turn disruptions into opportunities. And with all of the talks that we've heard about AI today, your AI and LLMs can generate answers, but meaning and context really comes from us. I mean, that's not something that's automated. The freedom to experiment comes from confidence in your data. So you can use AI responsibly and safely. So to go back to my original, thinking here was that data without governance is indeed chaos, and AI without context is risk. So that's our story and journey at Okta. If you have any questions, I can make myself available here. We can do it live? Okay. Maybe one question, 2 questions? Okay, we can, I can take 1 or 2 questions if anybody has any. If we don't get to your question, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn to continue the dialogue on LinkedIn.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. You mentioned that one thing that your future state is that you have to do less things manually. Everything you've presented, it sounds like you already have quite a system figured out to have a semantic layer and real self-service. So what's missing there? Is it the updating that layer, or what's missing there for you to reduce the manual efforts?
Yeah, so what's missing really is the semantic layer itself, but automation of the usage of MCP servers. So right now we're not using MCP at all. We're basically feeding it directly into Cortex and getting those answers. So the MCP server is really going to help us with the questions that you're asking. It routes it to the right layer, semantic layer, which we still have to build to then really automate, the ongoing Q&A with the user and the AI. Like that part is missing. Right now we're just the one-way street where we're asking the question and then that's it. Yeah, you could still do the VQR with Snowflake Cortex, but it's not super scalable, I would say. So that's missing. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
You mentioned data contracts and also that your models are version controlled. Are you using the DBT contracts and DBT like versioned models for that? Or was that something else?
We're using it 2 ways. So we're not fully there yet too. We're using model contracts from DBT, but the other thing that we're really doing with our upstream owners, so things like application owners, creating this dialogue with them, like if something fails on their side, like if a schema changes, what are the lines of communication, the lines of ownership, how do we take accountability and things like that. But DBT contract is that first step as to where like the DAG would completely fail if the schema isn't the same. One more? Okay.
Thanks for the presentation. I have a question about your future steps. So you said in the future you want to use the MCP server, right? To have more functionality with your AI. But how are you guys thinking of implementing that? After the announcement at the keynote today about DBT agents and all of the offerings in the Discovery Hall for products that can activate all of this DBT context, and also the option of building it yourself. How do you guys think you're going to approach this?
Yeah, I think some of these things will evolve as we, meet with the team, come up with new ideas. There were new announcements today, and there were new announcements actually even at the Snowflake conference, as Tristan mentioned earlier this morning. So it could be MCP via DBT. At Okta, we're also creating our own MCP. So it could even change the game there, where we're going to be able to take context from Snowflake, other places. So yeah, I really don't have the answer for that as to what we might do, but we will definitely look at all directions and come up with a proper way to use the MCP server responsibly for AI.
Right, thanks.
Thank you so much. That concludes this talk. Please don't forget to take the post-session survey, and I appreciate everybody attending, listening, and being engaged. Thank you.